Hello. So today we'll be talking about mental status examination, which is the essential most examination or a very important topic for anyone who's studying psychiatry or psychology. So mental status examination is basically equivalent to our, let's say, if we have to examine the circulatory system or the heart, we will do a cardiovascular system examination. If we have to look at the lungs and their functioning and the airways, we'll do a respiratory system examination. Similarly, in psychiatry and psychology, we do a mental status examination. So the headings under which we read mental status examination is general appearance and behavior, which we usually call GAB. Then we talk about the psychomotor activity, the eye to eye contact, and the rapport. Then we talk about speech. Then we talk about mood and affect. Then thought, perception, judgment, insight, and we also talk about higher mental functions. But this is something which we'll be taking up in the next videos, not today. So, starting with the general appearance and behavior. So, when do we do a mental status examination when while interviewing the patient? When do we start our mental health MSc? Is basically as soon as the patient or the client walks into the door. The moment they walk through your door is when your MSc should start. You should start making some observations. So, what all observations will we make in general appearance and behavior is we can start with their gait. Is the gait normal? Is it ataxic, supported, unsupported? Um, any limping that you observe, right? Then we have to talk about the dressing, whether, and in by dressing, of course there are many cultural differences, but we talk about whether the dressing is appropriate for the setting. For example, if you're walking into a doctor's office, there's a particular type of clothes that you would wear, and some of the types would obviously not be acceptable. So is the dressing appropriate to the setting, and is it appropriate to the weather? Then what about the hygiene of the patient? So is the patient kempt and tidy, or the patient well groomed? These are the or not. So if and for looking into these, we have to look, let's say, at the hair. Are they shabby or are they cut nicely? The nails, have they been cut? Are they too dirty? Then the oral hygiene is something we can look into. If there is any overt smells that are coming, that can also be noted here. We also talk about the body build. So we can say maybe a moderate build or a thin build or a heavy build person, right? Then we have to look at then we have to look at does the person look their age? So the person looks according to the age, looks younger than the stated age. Let's say a person says that they are 25, but they appear at least well off in their 40s. Then do they appear older to their stated age? And we also have to talk about whether or not the person greeted the examiner. So here we can also make an additional observation: ki did the patient greet the examiner on his own, or on their own, or after being greeted, or did not greet at all? And also, did they sit in the interview room when they were asked to, or did they keep standing or not after they were requested to sit? Then also, we have to talk about the touch with surroundings. So, is the patient in touch with their surroundings or not? Are they oriented to their surroundings or not? Then it's the attitude towards the examiner. Is the person cooperative towards the examiner? Cooperative, respectful, or is it hostile? Let's say the patient is getting aggressive or guarded, that they're talking about everything else, but when you start talking about illness, they would not talk to you, evasive, etc. Right? So all of these things and any other observations, also any other overt observations that you make about the patient, you can write under the general appearance and behavior heading of the MSc. Now we go ahead and talk about the psychomotor activity, which is the second heading in our MSc. So what is psychomotor activity? Is the motor manifestation. It is how we define it. It's the motor manifestation of psychic activity. Basically, how in the motor or the behavior of the patient you can see evidence of the psychological activity. Right? So normally it is, how do we judge it? Is basically it could be either increase, it could be normal, or it could be decrease. So, for example, increased. So, what would be a normal this thing? Let's say you are sitting in a therapist room, there would be some fidgeting, but you will be able to sit straight, and there will be a sitting tolerance, and you will be able to hold a conversation, and your speed of speaking would also be okay, and your gestures will be like normal gestures that you use in any conversation. Now here, if the psychomotor activity is increased, let's say in manic states, the person would be jumping around, or let's say not able to sit at one place, having a lot of gestures, um, dancing in the middle of the interview. Then anxiety states, for example, a lot of fidgeting will be there, a lot of playing with the hair, fixing the dresses, etc., fixing the or rubbing their palms multiple times. So there could be increased psychomotor activity. Then decreased psychomotor activity could be in depression. For example, the person is sad, stooped posture is there, there is decrease. In depression, the person's psychomotor activity will be reduced, the gestures would be lesser, the speed with which the one person is moving, that would be decreased. This would also be decreased, and it is often asked in negative symptoms of psychosis or schizophrenia. What are these negative symptoms? These are anhedonia, that is not interested in doing things that one was earlier interested in. Alogia, decreased speech output. Asociality, decreased social interactions. And there are two more. These will be learning in negative symptoms of schizophrenia, where we talk about when we talk about schizophrenia. Right. You can find, and nowadays these are called the 5 A's of schizophrenia. You know what? Do you recall what were the 3 A's of schizophrenia, which Bleuler suggested? Something to go back and think about. All right. Then we move forward to eye contact. Here, obviously, no one keeps staring all the time at the other person while having a conversation, but we want that in a conversation, the amount of eye contact that you would generally expect, that whether it is present or not. So, we describe it in the two headings: whether eye to eye contact was established, or so in the initial phases also, did the person look at you when they were greeting them or not? Did they look at you when they greeted back or not? And whether this eye contact was maintained. So if at any point during the interview there was some eye contact, then eye to eye contact was established. And then if the person kept coming back during conversation to maintain eye contact, then eye to eye contact is established and maintained. So what can be the variables? Either this can, it could have been established and maintained, either it could have been established but not maintained, but or either eye to eye contact was not established, that they didn't look at you only, and it therefore obviously not maintained also. Then we look at something called rapport, and we love to have a lot of complex definitions. This is one of them. So as per CTP, which is the standard reference, rapport is the spontaneous, so it should occur without any force and it should occur spontaneously. It's a spontaneous conscious feeling. So both the party, the examiner and the patient, should sort of acknowledge this at a conscious level uh, of harmonious accord, sympathy, and mutual responsiveness. So what does this mean? That there should be like a harmonious conversation. No one should be sort of slapping each other off or going at each other's heads, and there should be sympathy between both the people and a mutual responsiveness, that one should be responding to the questions of others and vice versa. And this leads to the development of, important word being, a constructive therapeutic relationship. So it is a therapeutic relationship in which the client is being treated by the doctor or the psychologist or the psychiatrist, and it is constructive, that something good is coming out of it. This is the definition of rapport. So we say whether or not rapport was established or not. Basically, if you're able to, in simple words, how you judge it as is, you're able to have a conversation with the patient. They're not getting hostile. They're replying to you. They're explaining to you their sort of feelings and their expectations. Then you can say that rapport is established. Otherwise, not. Okay. Moving forward, we come to lots to cover. Speech. Right, so speech has around 8 components. Speech may first we talk about the rate of speech, that is how fast or how slow, basically the speed with which the person is saying. So the way I'm talking about right now, that would be a normal speech. If I were to speed up and speak very fast, and so that you're not able to understand, also you're not able to follow, this is increased. And if I speak like this, which is too slow, this is decreased rate of speech. Then we talk about the tone, which is basically the loudness or how loud I'm speaking. So it can again be normal, it can be increased or decreased. Then the volume or the amount of speech. Volume is basically the amount of speech. So basically, how much I spoke. Did I just speak 2 sentences during the whole interview? Did I not let the examiner speak only during the interview? Or was there a back and forth conversation and a normal amount of what I spoke? So normal, increased or decreased. Then we talk about the relevance of speech. So whether what I was saying was relevant to the topic asked, whatever the conversation, so relevant to the topic that is going on in the conversation, whether it is relevant or irrelevant. Then coherent. Am I able to understand the person what they are exactly speaking? So if it is understandable, then it is coherent. If it is not understandable, then it is not coherent or incoherent. Then the reaction time, or how much time I take before the other person, after sorry the other person stopped speaking, and I start answering. So it can be normal, Like in a normal conversation, we listen to the person, what the other person is saying, and then we react almost immediately. Or the reaction time is increased. That is, I will take more time to answer. Let's say I have finished asking you a question and you answer after a long pause of 2 minutes, that's an increased reaction time. Or the reaction time is decreased. That I'm blurting out answers, and I'm not letting you speak only, and I'm interrupting you multiple times, and that's the reaction time. That's the decreased reaction time. Then we talk about the goal directedness. So if I start speaking, let's say, about goal directedness, and I suddenly go towards talking about, oh, Taj Mahal is so such a beautiful monument. It is one of the seven wonders. Oh, I had poha yesterday. So my there is no goal in what I'm speaking. So it can either be goal directed or not goal directed. And lastly, some people also talk about prosody. That is the sort of musicality are there. So in human speech, we stop at full stops, we give a pause at commas, we emphasize something. So all of these things, are they present in my speech or not, or am I speaking like a robot? That's what we mean by prosody of speech. Now, talking about mood and affect, these are two similar but different things. So, वैसे if I were to explain it to you, what it is mood is basically what we ask the patient, आप कैसा महसूस कर रहे हैं. So it could be happy, sad, ठीक ठीक नहीं हूँ, खराब, चिड़चिड़ा, whatever. And affect is what you observe. Does the person appear happy? Do they appear, sorry, what you observe, do they appear irritated, do they appear extremely sad or depressed? So here we'll try to define these. So mood is a pervasive, that is, it has pertained and it has existed for a long period of time, and a sustained feeling present all throughout the day, feeling, tone, which is experienced internally. It is subjective to the patient. This is what the patient is feeling. And this influences, what does it influence? The person's behavior. So how I am feeling will influence how I act, and also my perception of the world. How do I perceive what you are saying to me, what you are showing me? This will also depend on my mood. Now, affect is basically objective, right? So it is the pattern of observable. So these are things which you can observe, behaviors, that is, which is the expression of. This will be the expression of. What is this objective state? An expression of the subjectively. So this is basically the subjectively experienced feeling state. This is the definition, but basically affect is the expression of mood. Affect is objective, mood is subjective. Affect is the objective expression of what you feel subjectively most of the times. Right? Now, how do we, again, if we were to assess affect, it also has certain domains. So one is subjectivity when we ask the mood. Right? Then we talk about the quality of affect. We'll just talk about it in a minute. The appropriateness, is it appropriate to the situation? So let's say someone just got hurt and the patient starts crying. uh, then it might be appropriate. But if the patient starts laughing incomprehensibly and uncontrollably, then it might be an inappropriate affect. So it can be appropriate or inappropriate. Then congruent. So congruency, these are two important concepts: congruency and appropriateness. So congruency is to the thought processes. So for example, I am feeling sad. I know that I am sad, but I'm crying. Then this is not congruent with what I'm thinking, right? So this is congruency. Congruency is to the thought process, and appropriateness is to the situation. Right. Then the range of affect. So am I able to express both sadness and the extremes of happiness? Am I able to go to both poles of sadness and happiness or not? Based on that. Then intensity is also what some people comment on. So in intensity, three different. So basically, how sad or how happy can you express yourself self during an interview, right? So there can be something called shallow. So you appear to have emotions, but they do not lack any depth. So you'll smile, but not really, and you'll laugh, but not really. So, and flat is that there is no affect. Like you will not be able to read this person's expressions at all. And blunt is basically a, so there's a uniform sort of voice and expression irrespective of the context. Right. Then there is the lability of affect. Lability होता है कि how, if given an external stimulus, how quickly do we change, do our emotions change? So if I slap you, you would cry, that's okay. I would so sorry. Liberty means unrelated to the external stimulus. Do does my uh, does my affect change? So let's say we are talking and your mood is going sometimes up, sometimes down. We talk about something funny, you get a little happy, and we talk about something sad, you go like this should be normal. Then let's say we talk about something happy, you're happy, then we talk about something sad and still you get very happy, and suddenly we're talking about something happy and you get very sad and start crying. So like there's a lot of fluctuations and these are unrelated to the stimuli. This would be lability of affect. Then is the mode or affect reactive to what we are saying or not? Is it communicable? If I laugh, is my laugh contagious? Does the other person also smile or not? That's communicability. And now we talk about what we left in the starting, that is the quality of affect. So if the affect, if the mood appears to be what we call normal, that there is some fluctuations which is obviously normal for for like a average human behavior, then we will call it euthymic. We will call this behavior euthymic. So it's a normal range of mood. Then there can be depressed, which is obviously when we're feeling low and sad or sorrowful. Then there is the important terminology. There are the important terminologies of elevated, which means that the mood is more cheerful than normal. So, and this normal, by normal we mean normal for the person, right? Then euphoria is one step ahead, where there is an exaggerated feeling of well-being which is not explained by. Okay, so let's say someone in my family died and I am still laughing out loud and not acknowledging the pain. And even if I am acknowledging, I'm still appearing to be very happy. So this would be that despite whatever external events are going on, I still have an exaggerated feeling of well-being. Then there is elation. What we mean by elation is basically euphoria along with an increased psychomotor activity. So if there is euphoria, I'm feeling a state of euphoria plus there is an increased psychomotor activity. And add the last two here. So exaltation will be elation. So elation is present. Elation was what? Euphoria plus increased psychomotor activity plus there is a delusion of grandiosity. We'll talk about delusions later. And last one is ecstasy. What does ecstasy mean? That there's basically nirvana or feeling of rapture or blissfulness. So this would be like a spectrum. So there is on one end of the spectrum, there is depressed affect, there's euthymia. So the euthymia would be more in the middle. And here we have, like we said, first there is elevation, euphoria. So there is elevation, there's euphoria, there's elation, there's exaltation, there's ecstasy. In other types of qualities of affect would be irritable, anxious, etc. Okay, next we go to thought. So thought is a very big topic, and we'll have to take disorders of thought in a separate chapter or separate video. But how do we describe thought? Basically, so we talk about it under four headings. We talk about the form of thought, we talk about the flow of thought, we talk about the content of thought, and we talk about the possession of thought. So how do we examine thought? How do we examine what you are thinking? So we examine thought by what this person speaks, or how, so we judge the thought by speech, right? So form, basically, in a normal like in a usual setting, um like my conversation should follow a flow, right? I should go from point A to point B to a logical point C. Let's say if you ask me, okay, where do you stay? So maybe let's say I start, Connaught Place. Yeah, I so in Connaught Place there is A block, and then in A block there is this building, let's say Regal Cinema. I live just behind it. So there's a logical sequence to what I'm saying, and the form of thought is normal. Now let's say I say this. You ask me where I live, and I say, CP. CP is so beautiful because of the Britishers. You know what? Britishers took away uh, took away a gemstone. You know what name it is? Um, I read it somewhere in Karol Bagh. Have you taken the Karol Bagh metro ever? So there is no structure to what I'm saying. I'm just saying random things, and there is no form of or there's no proper form of what I'm saying. So that's basically poor form of thought. Then flow. Flow we basically judge by the speed of our speaking. So is the flow normal? Is the flow increased, or is the flow decreased? Then the content. In content, we'll talk about delusions, which are false fixed beliefs, unshakable, We'll talk about this in disorders of thought video. Then overvalued ideas, any preoccupations, etc. And in possession, we'll talk about whether or not I think that my thoughts belong to me. So in OCD, I people have thoughts which they do not want. So these are ego dystonic. They feel that, these are not my thoughts, I don't want these. And in delusions, these are ego syntonic. They don't question their thoughts. Right. Then we have perception. So in perception, are there any perceptual abnormalities? So let's say if person is having visual hallucinations, they might be pointing to someone, or they might be counting something. They might feel like that it might look like they're talking to someone even and not talking to us. They might be whispering to themselves, something like this. So is there is there a normal perception, or are there any hallucinations or any illusions? Again, hallucinations are basically, these are perceptions which are occurring without a stimulus. So these perception can be in, let's say, tactile, so tactile hallucinations, visual hallucinations, that I'm seeing things which are not there. Then auditory hallucinations, I'm hearing things which are not there. Olfactory hallucinations, I'm smelling things which don't smell. Then there are some visceral or somatic hallucinations, that I'm feeling some sensations in the body which are actually not there. So things like this. Now we go to the second last part of this, which is judgment. So judgment is basically how we sort of compare and evaluate our surroundings and ourselves, and our future, and we make actions and we decide the course of our actions based on these judgment on these choices that we take. So our judgment decides the course of our actions. So if we have a intact judgment, then our actions will not be harmful, or would be basically standard, and the course of action would not be anything out of the ordinary. But if it is impaired, then there might be things like aggressive behavior, self-harming patterns, etc. Now, how do we judge? The judgment is personal, social, and test judgment. So, personal judgment, we'll ask, what will you do after going from the clinic? So, in immediate future, or what will you do after discharge? Usual answer should be, I'll get better, I'll take medications, or I'll go back to work. But if some then in social judgment, we'll talk about how we will see how the behavior is towards the examiner, or towards the family members, or towards the hospital staff. In test judgment, we ask standard questions like the fire question. We ask, if there's a fire in the neighborhood, what will you do? And the standard answers are, I'll call an ambulance, I'll call the fire brigade, or I'll get a lot of water and throw on the fire, or I'll evacuate the people inside. All of these are acceptable. And let's say you're going on the road and you find a letter lying around, and you find a post box also near it. What will you do? And the letter is addressed also, stamped also. Then standard answers would be, I will put it in the post box. Or someone might also say that these days post boxes are not available, so I'll just leave it there. So these would be all acceptable answers. But of course, we have to keep in mind that it should be based on what our patient's understanding level is, and what their knowledge level or socio-cultural background is. Now, we look at the total judgment when we are giving our opinion. If all three, that is personal, social, and test judgment, are okay, then we say that the judgment is intact. But if either of these three, personal, social, or test, is not okay, then we will say that judgment is impaired. Now, last thing, grades of insight from CTP 10th edition. Earlier there were 6 grades of insight, now there are only 5. These are the 5 that we remember now. So first is complete denial of illness, that the patient will say that they have no issues, no changes in behavior, no help is needed at all. Second is that there is slight awareness that something has maybe changed in them, but they deny this at the same time. Let's say sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, sometimes they accept there is some problem, sometimes they say there is no problem at all. Third is that they are aware of their condition, that they are aware they're sick, but they will blame it on either other people, or they will blame it on external factors, they'll blame it on medical factors, or unknown organic factors. Then intellectual insight is that they are aware, but they are not taking any steps to correct whatever issues are going on. And emotional insight is true insight, or the highest level of insight, where the person is aware also, they're making changes they're taking treatment also, making changes in behavior also, lifestyle factors are also being addressed, and they're doing everything to get better, not just okay, but things to get better. So these are all the this is the MSc part of it, the basics. In the next video we'll talk about higher mental functions and the rest of the things that we have to discuss. Thank you.